Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Procurement. I'm Philip Heitzner, and joining me today is my good friend Naseem Malik of MRA Global Sourcing. And if you're attempting to retain or to hire procurement talent, and you're in a location where the market is pretty tight, then this show is definitely for you. And my conversation with Naseem is actually broadly split up into three different parts. First, I hit him with a number of questions related to the procurement job market today. So what's the current state, what signals would suggest the market's changing, and what are the most in-demand skill sets? And then Naseem shares his perspective on what a procurement leader can do, not only to retain the A-level talent that they have in the team today, but also how to attract the professionals that are needed to take their organizations to the next level. And I think that's particularly important when we're in a market like we are today, where you really have to become an employer of choice. While Naseem and I actually originally connected earlier in the summer, I want to thank Procurious for initiating today's conversation. So both Naseem and I will be attending Procurious's inaugural US Big Idea Conference. It's in Chicago, takes place on the 28th of September, and Naseem will actually be a speaker at the event. So to find out more about that, head on over to bigideasummit.com. That's bigideasummit.com. Okay, one last thing to mention. So when I started editing, I realized that there was a problem with my studio mic. Essentially, the software had crashed. So today's episode was, unbeknown to me at the time, actually recorded using the built-in mic in my computer. It still sounds fine, but it's just not the studio quality that you've been used to. And I just wanted to let you know why that was. So let's go straight into our conversation. And in my first question, I asked Naseem why, after a successful 15-year career as a practitioner, did he then decide to launch a procurement recruiting firm?
Having spent all this time in the procurement function, as I got into this business, I tell folks, look, procurement is still my first love, and now I'm just serving it in a different capacity. And this capacity happens to be in the world of executive search and recruiting. So having worked in a lot of different industries and a lot of different companies, one of the things that I was told I have a good knack for is connecting people with companies and building teams, finding the right people for the right roles, and even internally where I worked. So, after having worked in a lot of different organizations, I was at that crossroads in my career where I felt this would be the time if I wanted to pursue my entrepreneurial ambition. So I looked at, what would make sense, and how do I get best of both worlds in it, and this is something that seemed the way to go. So it's been a fun 5 years helping companies find top talent now. So it's human capital sourcing instead of goods and services.
So what areas are you focusing on? What geographies or industries from a recruitment perspective?
Right. So that's the beauty of the function, since it transcends almost every industry out there. It allows us to work with a very wide swath of clients. So we've got everything from automotive to aerospace, CPG to med device, pharma, even consulting. So that's we're very broad when it comes to industries and companies, but very narrow when it comes to the function. So we focus 90% plus in the sourcing, supply management, procurement space. Primarily North America, though we've had some Europe and Asia as well. But, as we work with public companies, Fortune 1000, mainly Fortune 500, but also sometimes mid-sized private companies and PE companies. So that's the background.
So I guess the $64,000 question is, what's the state of the market at the moment for procurement talent?
The market continues to stay very robust. It is a very tight market right now. It has been candidate-driven for probably going on strong 2+ years.
Yeah.
What's an interesting thing we saw was even back early 2012, as the market was beginning to recover, procurement stayed pretty strong. Hiring stayed pretty strong, because even during recessionary times, companies always look to the function. Progressive companies that understood the value of the function or understand the value of the function, they definitely kept an eye on good talent, wanted to grow their teams, and we're always looking to upgrade talent. So So it never really got to the point where procurement had leveled off too much. And then when the market turned and the unemployment numbers continued to decline, that just added more pressure on the procurement talent. Because then companies are also competing, especially new emerging talent coming in from a lot of other functions out there that were attracting good talent too.
Do you think it's going to change anytime soon, if you had your crystal ball?
So, in terms of what we see right now, it is actually very consistent growth, right? Whether it's M&A activity, whether it's PE going in and picking up groups and turning those groups, or sourcing organizations around, or whether it's public companies that are undertaking massive transformation initiatives. We're continuing to see more and more of a demand for all kinds of sourcing talent, right? Not just managers and directors, but even analysts, to the point, even data scientists, right? A procurement data scientist was not a role 3 years ago that anybody was calling us for, but now that's something which they're looking at more and more. So
that's interesting.
There are some of the interesting things right now. Obviously, Hurricane Harvey is going to throw somewhat of a damper on some hiring. If you look at southeast part of the country, right? So Texas is our number one export state, right? It's our number one manufacturing state too. I just recently learned that. So, and when that gets affected, that is going to take a toll, especially since a lot of the oil and energy had just begun to pick up on the hiring side. But if we look at some of the indicators out there, ISM's they've got a PMI track. And that PMI track, the past 12 months, has continued to stay well above 50. Anything over 50 is expansion. So it was 58 just last week when they announced it. So September, October are generally strong months. So if you see manufacturing growing, you see manufacturing having very strong demand and the expansion the way it is. We see services has been strong for a long time. So couple that with manufacturing, these are good positive signs. So hopefully there aren't any trade black swans out there, or any kind of weather black swans that could throw things in disarray. But for the most part, we're continuing to see strength here.
Yeah. Do you see the market, or do you think of the market still as being cyclical, or is just the growing impact of procurement in organization, the growing demand, is that more structural, do you think? So it will continue around the business cycle?
So the business cycle does have an impact, and that's an interesting question, right? So it depends on, as we see companies where they are in the life cycle, right, what their maturity levels are. So when things do get slow, the companies that are progressive and want to invest in the function, they'll be looking at, they may scale back new hiring, and they may even clean out some folks, or clean out, if you look at, the skill set that they've got. So they may look at that as an opportunity and say, okay, we will now top grade, right? Let's find where our needs really are. And, they're all trying to do more with less and do it faster and better. So keeping that in mind, you see some of the more the bigger companies, progressive companies do that. But some of the other folks, so if we've gotten, there's a lot of portfolio companies out there that are always being bought and sold and are going through different stages. They'll continue to plow forward, right? They won't be too concerned with on the cyclical side. They need people. If they were going to hire 5 people to build a team, they may just go with 2 or 3 now. But we haven't seen, let's put it that way so far, a wholesale, okay, no, we're done, we can't bring anybody on, and we're just going to, if anything, eliminate roles. So we don't see that happening.
Are the skill sets changing? You mentioned data scientists. It's an interesting one. As I see more and more organizations building kind of a center of excellence around data and bringing in data scientists. But do you see that changing? Are the softer skills more in demand now than perhaps the technical skills?
So no, that's a very good question, because it is, I would say, equally right now, equally based. If they look at equally weighted, if you look at the technical with the softer skills. When I think about the technical, a lot of companies want folks that they assume if it's a certain category they're looking for, if it's indirect, within indirect, they may have marketing, they may have HR, they may want IT, telecom, or logistics. And, sometimes they're looking for very specialist roles in those categories. And they expect that they will have the know-how of an understanding of the supply market, of their categories, of what's happening. That's a given. But then over and above that, they're looking for folks that are also tech savvy. They're looking for candidates that can work on a lot of different data platforms as well too. How savvy are they with procurement technology? Right? Is it have they used any of these latest spend analytics tools? What's your understanding on P2P or just general e-sourcing? That's something which is definitely becoming important. The whole digitization strategy has continued to evolve. So that is becoming important. But as a component of that is, okay, once they do gain insights, once they do have a better feel for data and how they're going to analyze that and use that, can they articulate what they're learning? So that's where the soft skill comes in. Can they take that and put together a story and convince, influence, persuade both internal and external stakeholders? And that is, we begin to see that, whether it's a cultural fit, whether it's chemistry with business stakeholders. More and more companies will have candidates talk to their stakeholders and include them in the interview process and the hiring process to see, hey, can you work with this person, right? Can she come in and truly build that credibility with IT, or can this candidate come in and win over his engineering stakeholders? So that's becoming more and more important. One of the things they're doing, one of the ways they're doing that is through a lot of assessments too. A lot of psychological assessments, personality profiles, case studies, just to trying to figure what is their style and can it fit in with what they need. So those are some of the skill sets.
How effective then? I mean, it's interesting when you start talking about assessments, because I've been there and done that as well and completed these assessments, and they've told me a bunch of things, and I've always questioned the relevancy. How effective do you find that assessments are, as part of, or is it just another way of, reducing the large number of applicants, if you will?
Right. So they will save the assessments typically till they have either cleared the first or second stage. Okay. Sometimes it'll be after the first initial screening and before they get them on site. Sometimes it will be after they've been on site and they have interviewed a lot of folks. Maybe there's one last step left before they're going in to meet one of the more senior persons. And we find now more and more companies are saying, look, this is not a psychological or an intelligent test. This is not anything that will derail a candidacy. This is more of a data point for us to see, what their style is. Are they more introvert, extrovert? What's their leadership style? How do they think, right? How quickly do they think? Where would they fit in? So we have to assure candidates all the time, this is not to determine if you're a sociopath. Right. It's merely to see how you fit into the culture. But it is becoming much more of the norm right now. And these would be for more of the strategic roles, right? So I would say this would be more senior manager and above roles. If you were to look at analysts, senior analysts, consultants that we've hired, they would get more of the case studies, right? Sometimes they'll get an Excel test or a PowerPoint or here's a real life sourcing issue that we have. What would you do, right? Go put your story up and defend it.
So I know I'm hitting you with a bunch of questions here, Naseem. I do have some. I do want to go somewhere, but I have one more, and that's from a CPO perspective. So I see a lot of CPOs, or I hear of a lot of CPOs being hired that brought in from non-procurement backgrounds, and I see it seems to be happening more and more. I'm interested. A couple of things. One, do you see that on the ground from your perspective? And two, does that mean that the career path, within procurement to a CPO is not necessarily as defined as it used to be, and that companies are putting more value in a CPO on having some external non-procurement experience?
No, that's a very good question, because it goes back to, as I mentioned before, company's perspective, right? Yeah. So where we're seeing this, we are beginning to see this a little bit more, but mainly we're seeing this either in the pharma slash CPG world, more so than we would in traditional manufacturing or traditional, and by manufacturing I mean discrete manufacturing versus any specific vertical. And in those where we do see this, it's because now that they have more CPOs are getting a seat at the table. That's a good thing, right? Because they're being looked at as business partners. First and foremost, they are truly, they can add value to the business. They understand the impact that their function can brings to the organization, to the CEO, to the CFO. So as you look at that, then yes, they are becoming more open to that. I think recently Korn Ferry presented on skill set for the next generation of CPOs, and in that they had actually talked about this. It was a third. They're saying a third right now, and that's consistent with what we're seeing. A third of CPOs going into new roles are probably coming in from different functions. They've either been CFOs or they've been on the manufacturing side. They've been COOs, and they haven't taken the traditional path that most practitioners would. So, but I wouldn't really say that it's the tide has turned, and this is something which is now going to become become much more common yet, especially since procurement has just now gotten their seat at the table with the value that they've shown, and now they're going to build on that. But it is beginning to happen a little bit more. But then they also will go on, and typically those are the folks that want to go on and become CEOs of some companies, right? They want to go become general managers or run business units. So not all procurement or CPO people want to do that. Right. So that's kind of the mix there. But good question.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on today. Over and above those questions that I kept hitting you with, and it's a little bit more structured.
No, they're good. Good question.
One is talent retention, and one is becoming an employer of choice. And I want to go there because, as you talk about the market tightening, it means that when you have those A players, obviously we need to do everything we can to keep them, but also we got to think a little bit differently about how do we attract new A players to our team, because ultimately they hold all the cards in the decision making process. It's kind of a switch of the traditional hiring paradigm, I think. To kick things off on the topic of talent retention, why do people leave in the first place?
So the number one reason over the years I had heard in my, as I advanced in my career, and still hear a little bit of it, is number one reason is your boss, right? It's always your boss. You don't get along. You're not inspired. He or she is making your life miserable, and that's still applicable, but it's not the primary reason so much anymore. If we were to look at it, as we talk to candidates and we go out, and that's what we do. All day long, and clients, of course. But if we were to look at top one or two reasons beyond just obviously if your immediate supervisor is making your life miserable, then that is a very strong motivator. But beyond that, it's a recognition for what they're doing, and are they contributing? Are they really adding value? And is it something that's helping not just them and their group, but the company as well? So a lot of the folks right now mentioned that they're not getting enough recognition. They would like that. And the second one is just the career pathing, and that's something which it goes both ways, right? So companies realize this, and companies are using this to help strengthen, and we'll talk about that later, strengthen their retention as well too. And by career pathing, it's okay. They feel they have either maxed out, right? They're underemployed. There's nowhere for them to go. In fact, I just talked to a candidate this morning, very smart, young woman who's been working maybe 6-7 years, and realized in a role at a $100 billion company, and realizes she's only halfway there to get to the next step. Yeah, she's like, well, in the next 6-7 years, I can go 2 steps up if I go outside, and versus stay here. So why should I stay here? So for her, likes her boss, but the promotion and the career pathing is really constricting. So. And then the third one, if I were to add one there, it would probably be the training, the education that they're getting at the job too. So those would be the big ones. So
It's interesting you say training and education. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you probably noticed you probably noticed I didn't say money, right? Because money is a whole topic in and of itself that we can probably delve into later. I mean, that's always going to be a constant there.
Yeah.
It's very ubiquitous, right? It doesn't go there anywhere. It's always there. So, but yeah, the training you mentioned, the training, the education part, that also becomes important because that shows candidates that a company really believes in them and their future and is willing to invest, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you got to pay for their MBA. It could be something as simple as, okay, you can go to an ISM conference, you can go to Procurement Leaders, you can go to Concero, you can go, SIG or whatever it is, or you can, learn on your own or negotiation training, whatever it is, we'll invest in that. Yeah. So that kind of thing really helps too.
Yeah, the money thing you mentioned, it's like it always has to be right, but I always felt from my perspective that, you'd never go if the money wasn't right, but it wasn't necessarily the reason why I'd look to go in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So it shouldn't be the number one reason, right? It's an important reason, but it's not the number one reason. But as you mentioned that in the retention world, there is some good news for companies out there. Just recently, Conference Board announced, did a survey and came up with some very interesting stats. That this is the first time in 12 years that over 50% of workers that they surveyed claim that they're very satisfied with their job.
Interesting.
So that's good news. That's good news for good news for companies. Not so good news for people that need talent, right?
Right.
So that's why. Right, exactly. So when employment is up, and wages are finally beginning to rise a little bit. Layoffs are still at a very record low. The result is you've got a more optimistic, you've got a more contented workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly helps. They look at this and they realize, hey, we've weathered the storm from the Great Recession, and now they're actually happy, or maybe they've just beat themselves down to thinking, this is it, right? This is as good as it's going to get. So that's where we come in and tell them, no, there are greener pastures out there.
So what turns the head of a passive candidate then?
So, as we talk to them, those are the ones that we like, right? Mm-hmm. It's always a challenge, the available versus the valuable ones. The available candidates are the ones that are proactively applying and going everywhere. And active ones. The passive ones are ones knocking out of the park. They're not necessarily looking. Who we call these A players.
Yeah.
They're usually passive. So what turns their head is when we tell them, when we share insights about what's happening in the marketplace, whether it's trends, whether it's technology, whether it's a new leader moving into a different company and he or she being able to do X, Y, and Z. And then they're like, okay, so is that something you're doing here? Is that something, do you have these opportunities here? How does that compare and contrast to your environment here? So that's what gets them thinking, right? Once they see what's out there, the upside of going into a different role, going into a different opportunity, that, hey, this is something where we can make a bigger impact, that certainly gets them interested and they want to learn more, right? So the smarter ones will always have the conversation. They'll always engage, and look, they may not end up moving forward, but they'll keep their ears open, right? So they get the value of networking. They get the value of seeing, how things are shifting on the outside. There's some passive ones that don't even want to entertain a conversation. Right. And they're fine and they're happy, and you can ask them also, oh, great, so you're one of very few that we talk to. Congrats. Right. We take it you plan on retiring at this company then, right? Well, wait, no. Why would you say that? Well, because you said, this, and you don't want to learn anything else you don't want to learn about anything else out there. So then they're like, well, okay, maybe we didn't mean it quite that way. But then you can engage with them. So that's how we want to get them talking.
So if you're a CPO on the other side of that, and you're in a strong job market where recruiters are calling up their A-level talent, are there any signals that a CPO can look for that suggest that maybe their top players are being enticed? Or I'm just interested is there anything we can do to protect against that, for a company wanting to obviously hold on to their best people in a market where those people are going to really be in demand?
No, that's a very timely question. Just last week, I was talking to a leader for an organization, and she mentioned that for all their, and this is something I'm sure you've heard about this before too, right? A lot of companies want to identify their high potentials, right? Their high pods, high performers. And, we had done this in the past too. I remember, we would look at our staff and identify flight risk, right? High flight risk, low flight risk. When they were promoted, so kind of tracking their high posts. So one of the things that we see that a lot of more advanced CPOs and leaders of organizations do is they keep close tabs on their high posts, right? They'll want to see, okay, have we given them any kind of stretch assignments, right? Where are they in their career? How long have they been in this role? Can we give them some rotational opportunities, right? Can we make sure they're going out and representing our company in conferences, or they're part of councils where they can benchmark and share best practices? So continue to giving them more opportunity, right? Giving them one-on-one time as well too. And then just kind of keeping their hand on the pulse. And if they know me, right, asking me, hey, they haven't applied anywhere, have they? To which we tell them, we can't really tell you that, it's confidential, right. But that at least shows you that they are concerned and they want to know. So, but it's prudent for them to keep their eyes open and make sure that they're providing opportunities the best they can, depending on their company and what their situation is, and spending time with them. Making sure that if there are a high flight risk, how do you maintain that? Yeah. So,
do you find that most CPOs are doing that within a corporate framework? I think back to when I was a practitioner, and there'd be HR supported initiatives, to help do that. And in organizations where there were, then that process was in place, and where there weren't, it wasn't. I wonder, if for a CPO listening that doesn't necessarily have the HR kind of organization support in managing high potentials, do you see most of them doing something on their own?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's I'm glad you brought that up. So my last two places where I was, that's exactly what our CPO did. He came from bigger companies like UTC, where they had a very comprehensive plan on how they tracked it. Right, he worked in a couple of other companies as well too, and he was able to bring that over to our company, and he laid out the framework. Right, we came up with a very detailed competency model. We came up with, okay, here's what a career path looks like. Right, you go from a specialist to a manager, to a regional manager, to a director, corporate director, VP, CPO. So we laid all of those steps out. We showed them career paths. We showed them what the levels of experiences, what skill set each level that you should have, right? What your mastery should be here, what competencies you need to have, and then from there we came up with, okay, here's our high pull list. So it was a very detailed undertaking, but it was great because all of us were able to track our whole team, right? So not everybody's going to be a high pull, which is fine. Some people don't really want to advance. It doesn't mean they aren't valuable still, but we would have a plan for each and every one of them. And I remember when we rolled this out, our HR had gone through a lot of M&A activities. So a lot of companies have put together, so they weren't as HR wasn't quite ready yet to work with a lot of the functions. But they took our framework and used that as a internal benchmark and rolled it out with other functions. So yeah, if a leader is coming from an organization where he or she has done that, and they can set that up, it's very valuable. And that's something which, we found was helpful and really helped show value to the company that, yeah, look at these procurement guys leading the way on talent management and talent pipeline.
Yeah.
We talked about that earlier, some of the value that a CPO brings to the table. That was, in a couple of instances, we had moderated a roundtable just last year at an ISM conference. And one of the CPOs, this for a med device company, had brought that up. He's like, my CPO looks to me and says, you know what, procurement has been a fantastic pipeline of talent for the broader organization. Not just who the CPO hires into his team, but they groom them, and pretty soon you have other functions drawing them out of procurement and putting them in finance and manufacturing and operations. So he got lauded for doing that. So that's also a very interesting aspect.
Because that helps essentially have advocates around the organization as well, doesn't it? You're kind of passing through procurement. So you have two types of people. One is somebody who may be in procurement for their entire career, and others that pass through the function. But to bring folks in so they can understand the value that we can bring, so that then when they're placed into other functions, they act as a supporter and a facilitator to kind of bridge the gaps. I want to flip from talking about retaining your A players to actually attracting them. And in today's market, what are the rules of the road today for bringing in the top talent?
So going back to what I mentioned earlier, right? One of the reasons why people leave. So in the same survey, and then there's actually another model we use as we're assessing and surfacing and vetting talent for organizations, is exactly this, right? How do we get them? How do we find and attract and bring these folks on board? So, as we talk to these talented procurement practitioners, there are 5 things came right off the bat, and it lines up nicely with our model as well too. It's the people they work with, right? That was probably the most important thing they looked at, and in that it's also it's twofold. It's your supervisor, your immediate boss, and the people you work with, and that's the culture. It's the work itself, right? Is it engaging? Is it challenging? Is it something where I'm coming in and I can build and have an impact? So give them an opportunity where they have that aspect of it. And this is something which has become more and more important now. It used to be location. We would look at locations, and depending on where they are in the country, geography would play a big hand in it. But now it's also commuting, right? So people have become much more sensitive to, people, for instance, I'm in Chicago. People don't want to come, they live in the city. They won't go out and drive an hour in the suburbs. Even it could be the perfect job. They won't do it. They're not going to sit in a car for 2 hours. And I think back, I'm like, wow, when I started my career 20 years ago, I commuted 3 hours
you'd go anywhere
every day, and it was great. Yeah, it was normal. And now people look at you, wow, were you crazy? What a waste of life. I'm like, no, I don't think so, but okay. So those are like the top 4 or 5 things. And then within that the work environment, also the physical environment also comes in, right? It comes in on how are you set up, right? What's the aura? What's the environment, right? Is this an area where I feel I'll have good camaraderie with my peers? Are there areas where I can I can focus, I can have meetings, or what do I get on campus, right? So part of the whole work-life balance all comes into that too. And a lot of that depends on, if you're in Seattle or Silicon Valley or in New York City, of course. But, those are also some important things that you need to keep in mind if you want to become an employer of choice.
So if you mentioned a couple of things I wanted to touch on. You talked about the people that they work with, and also kind of that camaraderie, or the feeling, I think, of, I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing. How can a hiring manager or hiring organization actually expose potential prospects to the kind of people that they're going to work with, or the environment, or, to kind of give them a level of confidence or comfort that this is a place that they may want to work, or these are people they might want to work with?
No, that's an excellent point. And some of the more savvier candidates will be more proactive about this, right? So depending on what the interview process is, they will, obviously come on site, meet with the procurement team, and sometimes procurement team will have them meet with their stakeholders. So if they're working on a mechanical spend or electrical mechanical, and it's all direct commodities, then they'll work with they'll interview with engineering, they'll interview with manufacturing folks, they'll interview with other stakeholders they will be exposed to. Same on the indirect side, right? If you're working with marketing, then you're going to go talk to all the key marketing stakeholders as well. That's important. And then there have been times now, and it's becoming a little bit even more of a norm now, is that candidates will say, well, are there other people I can talk to at my level? Can I talk to my peers that work either in my group or not in my group, just to get a better feel for what the culture is there, what the culture is over there, what are the expectations, How are these supervisors? Because, another thing that's becoming more and more common is Glassdoor.
Yeah.
I believe it. I think it's called Glassdoor, right?
Yeah, I've spent some time on there. Yeah, everyone who's ever worked for a company and had a bad experience will go and post on the...
They'll all go there. I know, and we get tired of telling candidates sometimes, look, a lot of it is exactly to your point, Phil. It could be sour grapes, right?
Right.
People that have not so kind things to say about their sometimes current or usually former employers. But I'll tell you, it happened. We had a candidate. It happened twice, 2 different companies that had advanced probably halfway to the stage and then dropped out and said, no, we're done. We're withdrawing our candidacy because of what we read on there. And we pleaded. We're like, look, go through the process, talk to other folks that have worked there as well, too. Nowadays, it's very easy through LinkedIn and other tools to find former employees of the company. But they're like, no, we checked it out. There's over 500 people, and there was 90% of it was negative, so they can't all be wrong.
Right.
I'm like, well, of those 500, not even all of them, how many of them do you even know were in procurement, right? It doesn't apply to this group. This group is going through a transformation, new leadership. I mean, they're like, no.
You're part of the solution.
So we're like, okay.
Yeah,
exactly. So if they're going to be that myopic and not even consider the broader picture, then, we were like, that's okay. That's your choice, of course. So, but yeah, these are all things that become important for employers to keep in mind is, hey, it's not just one way anymore. A lot of that's one of the unfortunate things is we still see employers haven't really adjusted to these new hyper competitive conditions, right? These are new conditions where, you had 4 to 5 people for every one open job out there as little as 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. But right now, there's a record number of jobs open in the U.S. It's 6 million. That's the official number that we give, 6 million job openings. And that's one job opening for every officially unemployed person. There's obviously, we know a lot of official numbers are probably a little bit higher than that, but there's some that are out of the job market, some don't want to get into it. But if you look at what we in our space, 6 million openings. There's 6 million people out there looking that are probably qualified at some point. That's not a lot of options out there for employers. So to be able to adjust to that and realize how tight the labor market has become is part of what we have to educate our clients on.
So how important is the brand? You talked about Glassdoor. That kind of fits into the brand of your procurement group. And I wonder, one, do you think that's truly important now as we think about how to become more of an employer of choice? And 2, if it is, what can a CPO do to try and invest and increase the brand, either of themselves or of the organization that they're leading?
Brand is continuing to become very important. I mentioned this roundtable that we moderate at CPO Roundtable. This is the 4th year we did it, and every year there is some iteration of branding, and it just becomes more and more pronounced and more emphasized every year we're there. And even now, I'll give you an example. We had a really big pharma/med device /CPG type of client out there, and they had undergone a massive transformation about 2 years ago. But before that, about 5 years, horrible culture. Everybody knew that it was a complete churn and burn. Nobody lasted long. People working 12 hours and overworked, underpaid, and they were done with it. Well, there was M&A activity, new leadership comes in, and we were brought on. And luckily, the person that brought us on is a former colleague of mine. So we were able to speak to the changes going on. We know when we would talk to candidates, they're like, oh, they have a horrible brand. I mean, their brand in the market for their product was great, but the brand of procurement in that company was horrible. So that's where we had to change their minds. And no, look, this is what's happening. They've got a new CPO. He's here from Europe. He's making pretty big changes on what type of talent he wants to bring in. He's very open. He's like, no, we're not the best company right now to work for in procurement, but we will be in 3 years. That's our target. And this is how we're going to get there. So we would lay that vision out. We would lay out the hiring manager that, in this case, we were fortunate since, we know them personally. That also helps because most candidates want to know about who they're going to work for or the culture there. So we were able to change their mind. So that was a success story. But, ironically, this same client, when they came to us a year before this happened, we actually turned them down.
Really?
We said, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're not going to work with you because you do have a horrible reputation out there, and it's going to be exceedingly difficult to find good talent, A players that are going to want to come work for you. I don't care how good your brand is on the outside. Procurement, you're not considered very good. So now when we call back to those candidates and talk to them and tell them that, hey, this is what's happened. They took our calls, they listened, and, we were able to give them a lot of folks that are now working there, and they're all very happy. And then they become ambassadors, right? They become ambassadors, right. And they can go out and tell people that, yes, the brand has changed. So very important.
So as you're recruiting, you found a great candidate. You really like them. They're kind of on the fence as to whether it's something they want to do or not. How do you convince them to take that leap of faith?
So for them to go and join a new company and work in a new environment with sometimes a new leader in place, which is happening more and more, we've got to understand their motivations, right? We've got to understand what are the top 2-3 things that are most important to them. So are they driven by challenge? Are they being driven by location because they've got to move to a certain area, move out of a certain area? Is this opportunity going to provide them the advancement that they're not currently finding at their current place because there's a ceiling, financial challenges at their company, or whatever the case may be, they just can't grow? Or is it money? Right? Do they know that the market will bear a higher wage for them than what they're currently making? And they know that they've got to get to that next level that they can't do here. Or is it people, right? Are they truly seeking that culture, that more supportive, collaborative environment that they're not getting at their current place? So, or the last one is security, right? So, are they looking for somewhat more security? So once we've isolated those top 2 or 3, top 2 or 3 motivating factors, then we align those with what the opportunity is, and if it matches, if it's something that they can find here, and this would be truly a career advancing opportunity, we tell them to pursue it, take the call, talk to them, learn more about it, because it's a two-way street now, right? The employers do not have all the cards right now. If any employer still thinks like that, they're mistaken, right? So unless you're a handful of 2, 3, 4 companies out there, and those you can count off your hand, the Amazon, Google, Apples of the world that will call you, and they'll be assured that 90% of the people will call them back.
Yeah.
Short of that, we tell employers, look, you've got to sell them on the opportunity. So it's a two-way street. As much as you're looking for the perfect candidate is looking to make sure you represent these these 3 or 4 things, and we'll give them this opportunity for them to make the move. Because once a passive candidate, it's very hard to turn a passive candidate into an active candidate. But once they become an active candidate, they don't stay active for long, because they realize how valuable they now are, and they smell the proverbial blood, and they will be picked up. They will be picked up faster than you can imagine. And it happens to us every year, multiple times, that we do this to a candidate, and a company's hiring lead times are 10 to 12 weeks. Yeah. Somebody else swoops in, and those 10 to 12 weeks, they close the process and snare that A player faster than the company that actually, because of that company,
they will turn their head.
So we warn people all the time that this is a reality. So once they're at that stage, then they don't take long, and that's one of their strengths, right? They're deliberative. Yeah. They'll analyze, and they'll be very careful about making that move. But once they take that decision in their mind that they're ready to move, they do move.
Mm-hmm. Speed's so important then.
Exactly.
So I know it's coming up to time to wrap up, Naseem, and it's been a fascinating conversation. And I know we talked a lot off mic. I could probably talk for a lot more on a lot more kind of topics related to recruitment right now. But I guess I got to end somewhere. And so my final question for today was, what are some of the most creative ways that you've seen procurement organizations actually go about attracting and retaining the best talent? And I'm thinking specifically those that might not have the budgets to be competitive when you think about salary alone, because even though at the beginning we talked about the fact that it's not the be-all and end-all, it's still a critical decision maker. And if you can't, maybe you have a salary structure where you can't be overly competitive, how else can you be creative?
So that's something which we do come up against quite often, right? So not every procurement group has the luxury of their CFO giving them a blank check and saying, go find the best talent that you need. Money is not an object. Right. That hasn't happened very often. I wish it were more the case, but it doesn't. So that's where, exactly. So that's where we do have to get more creative with them. And a lot of times companies don't realize inherently they have that advantage. For instance, they could be a fascinating online product that everybody knows about, and they're now part of PE. So we find talented practitioners, they want to go work in a growing company that may or may not be tech-driven, but they're part of a private equity. And a reputable private equity is like, okay, good, we're going to be able to work here, and the rewards, the comp may not be as competitive, but there could be long-term incentives in play, or there could be another aspect there that over the long run will compensate on purely the money side, right? So that's one thing. The other area also is location. Sometimes we get candidates that say, hey, we need to move to certain areas, and we're okay with not being even compensated to where we are today. Because we're looking for an environment where we can do this. We're looking for this type of company. And so we're able to make that match for them, find them those types of opportunities, and they're happy working there. And, it could be a lower cost of living. It could be a bunch of other reasons, but they're fine with that, and they can compensate on what, the trade-off was. And then the third one is the leader, right? So who they're going to work for. So if we go to companies, or if we take them to companies where they can go and learn from a renowned leader, somebody that comes from a very reputable company, has a very strong track record, and a past performances that we know have turned into future successes in other companies, that is also a draw, because they'll look them up and be like, yeah, I really wasn't looking to make a change, but I know this company, I know the leader here. These guys had won awards, innovation awards, or tech awards. So yeah, I would be interested, because I think these guys are doing some pretty cool things, and they're not driven by money as well too. So it's all about selling, what other intrinsic value that the company has, or what they can offer. Sometimes it's mid or long term, but those kind of things are also important. And then depending on where you are, right? We've worked with clients on the West Coast where, hey, now they've got to offer free food, free coffee, free massages, free you name it, just to compete, right? You're going to be able to compete. I mean, if you're going to look for people in Silicon Valley, you've got to be able to offer almost everything that the Teslas and the Ubers and the Apples of the world are offering. Otherwise, you're not. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to find people that are going to come in and want to work there. So, and that's another area where, you know what, salary may not be the driving factor here, but we will be open to that. And then let's say where I am right now in the Midwest. So something as simple as being able to work remote, providing increased flexibility can do wonders, right? If there's a candidate living in the city and he or she doesn't want to go to the city, to the burbs or vice versa, you can work remote 2 days out of the week. That, even something like that, people will take those jobs because it gives them that work-life balance. It lets them do what they want to do, and they can accept the trade-off on the comp side. So that's where we have to get creative and make sure. We're all in the procurement world. We're supposed to look at total cost, right? Total value here. It's the same concept here. Look at it much more holistically.
Well, Naseem, just to finish up, I'd love to, if you could just share where listeners could reach out. If it's a CPO wanting to learn a little bit more about a market, whether it's somebody who's been listening into the conversation thinking, what, maybe it's time for me to go and look and see what other options are available out there for me. Where can they go to find out a little bit more and to connect with you directly?
Yeah, sure. So our website is mregs.com. So our name of our firm is MRA Global Sourcing. So that's mregs, mrags.com. So we have a lot of our openings. We have things about our firm. We're active in writing. So we've got blogs, we've got articles, and we do a lot of cross posting as well. We're very active with ISM as well. So happy to share any insights and any other industry tidbits that we get and help serve the function in that way. So that would be a place where you can find all of that and contact information as well.
Okay, great. What I'll do is I'll include all those on our show notes for today's episode. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/Naseem. That's artofprocurement.com/Naseem. I'll put all the links there and your LinkedIn details as well and the website, so folks don't have to stop at the side of the road and jot those down. They can go to the website afterwards. So thanks again, Naseem, for joining me. It's been a really insightful conversation. It's a topic that I'm really interested in and really passionate about as well, especially as the procurement function changes and evolves. So much opportunity out there, but we got to kind of think differently about how we find, retain, and inspire and motivate, I think, the best talent. So I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Hi there, it's Phil here again, and I just wanted to thank you once more for sticking with us through the mic issue that impacted my side of the audio today. It's pretty typical. I've been working on batching interviews so I can do as many in a single day as possible. And so I recorded a couple of other shows today, and this issue has also impacted them. But I think the good news is you can still hear it clearly. It's just not the high standard that I set for my own audio in the show. But with that being said, I just hope that you have a really great week, and I'll be back next week with another interview. So until then, take care. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.